had about 40% of
Welcome to another episode of Coffees for Closers. Today, you guys are in for a very special guest. I'm sitting down with the founder and CEO of Legacy Fighting Alliance, an ally of the UFC and a breeding ground for 27% of all of the current UFC champions. They are breeding the best of the best of the best, and their fight teams are incredible. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Legacy Fighting Alliance, Ed Soares. Thanks, Ed, for jumping on the show.
Oh man, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Coming in hot from Redondo Beach. I appreciate you coming in. It's an absolute pleasure. I myself am a big fighting fan of yours, fan of what you're doing, and a fan of what you're doing to really elevate the fight game. So, God bless.
Thank you.
I like to start every show off the same way I start with all my guests. And what's your morning routine, Ed?
I wake up. It depends on the day. I don't have like a set routine every day. Um, I just wake up, grab a coffee at the downstairs, and then kind of see what I have to do for the day. So I don't really have a set routine. If I have time and there's waves, I'll go surf. If not, I'll just go right to the office.
Nice. Okay. Nothing crazy like these fighters that you're breeding.
No, nothing like that.
Nice. So I'm gonna jump right into it. What was your journey like when you started in the MMA game? Like, what was the vision to start LFA? How did that start? What year did it start? What was the concept that you had that really made it different than what existed at the time, which is the old school UFC?
Well, the reality of it is I started back working in the business in back in 2004. When I got into the business, I got into the business producing a TV show called Passing the Guard. It was a program. It was a TV show, like a magazine show from Brazil. It was called Passando a Guarda in Brazil, which translates to Passing the Guard, and we started broadcasting that in 2004. And then eventually it led into me, my partner and I, starting our management company, which is called Tough Media, and then we I managed athletes. So we were bringing our niche was kind of, we were bringing athletes from Brazil. I'm Brazilian. I was born and raised here in California, but my mom and dad are Brazilian, and so I spoke fluent Portuguese. And my business partner is from Brazil. I actually met him when I was like 15 years old. He actually was my next door neighbor in Redondo, and that's when we first met. And he's a legend in the sport. His name is George Guimarães, and everyone knows him as Joinha, is kind of his nickname. But he's just been a legend, and he's been a pioneer in this sport. As a matter of fact, when Rorion Gracie moved here from Brazil in the late 70s, George came with them to spread the word of jiu-jitsu.
Wow. I mean, you guys have been pioneering, BJJ since its onset here in the U.S. I asked you about the Gracie family. You've known them since they were children, and you're in you guys never moved. You're all in the same area, the South Bay.
Yeah. I've really I've known Horian, and I actually became really good friends with Hoyce, and that's he actually got me into training jujitsu, was Hoyce.
And he's the founder of UFC.
No, Horian is
Horian's
the
the founder
founder
of
of UFC, but Hoyce was the Gracie who Horian put in there to prove the efficiency of jujitsu. The UFC was never started to become a sport. Horian created the UFC to prove to the world that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is the most efficient martial art in the world, and he proved that. And there was other guys that, in theory, they say, oh, Hickson was better this, but they wanted to use Hoist because he was the best example of how you didn't have to have size or muscle or anything like that to make jujitsu work. It was all technique. And Hoist was 6', 6'1", 170 pounds, and he created the Ultimate Fighting Championship to show the efficiency of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And obviously he proved that. And then the sport kind of, and then the UFC kind of took on a life of its own and developed to what we see today.
It's amazing, just to prove the power of leverage.
Yes.
The power of leverage is so immense when you go up against a monster and a little guy like Hoist or Huron or all the Gracie family who went into the UFC and just mollywopped everybody at small sizes. People were bewildered by the power of leverage.
Yeah, I mean, jujitsu was unknown. People didn't understand it, and like I said, Horian proved his point that nowadays you cannot fight mixed martial arts without knowing jujitsu. If you don't know jujitsu, you're gonna get beat.
I mean, they had wrestlers, they had grapplers, but nobody. BJJ just was the supreme. But when I ask people like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu versus Japanese Jiu Jitsu, because Brazil got Jiu Jitsu from Japan,
Right.
and then they just improved upon it or added more technique to it.
They modified it more for real live combat
Combat.
versus more of the martial art of it. I mean, obviously it is a martial art, but the Gracies, Helio, um, Horian's father, was the one who really modified it because he was such a smaller guy. He had to prove that you didn't have to have size and bulk to be efficient.
Yeah, he was a tiny guy.
He was.
He's still alive. He's like 90, right?
No, no, he's
He,
passed away. I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago. I don't recall the
Helio.
actual date. Yeah.
Yeah. The Gracie family is amazing. It's how they keep jujitsu at every age and how they train their kids at birth, just like very small
Yeah.
moves.
It is incredible. I mean, they, like I said, the UFC wouldn't be here today without Horian Gracie.
Now we fast forward. So 2000. So when did Legacy start?
Well, the way it started was I was the president of the RFA, which stood for Resurrection Fighting Alliance. And then there was Legacy Fighting Championship based out of Texas, which was owned by a guy named Mick Maynard. Mick Maynard and his wife owned Andrea. Owned Legacy Fighting Championship, and we were both on um, Access TV at the time. So we approximately did about, I don't know, 14 shows a year. Legacy did about 14 to 15 shows a year. And basically, the reason we formed the LFA was because we were always constantly trying to, negotiate as we would do in business to better our deal with Access TV. And and what happened was is every time Mick would go to Access TV and try to negotiate to get a better deal, they would turn around and say, "Well, hey, if you don't like it, I could always give more dates to the RFA." And every time we would go and negotiate with them, um, they would say, "Hey, if you guys don't like it, I could give more dates to Legacy." And what ended up happening is one time, I just sat down with Mick, and we actually, before we sat down, in 2015, Access TV, a lot of people would say, "Hey, the RFA is better than Legacy," and some people would say the Legacy is better than the RFA. So I'm a competitive person, so I said, "Well, then let's see who's better." And what we did is we were the first ones in the United States and North America to do an event that was uh, RFA versus Legacy. And what we did is we did three fights that night that were our guys that fought for RFA versus their guys that fought in Legacy. And then we did one title fight of the RFA, one title fight for Legacy. And then the final fight of the night was our champion versus their champion in the flyweight division. And we created a title called the Access TV title. There was only one event that had it. There was only one person that won the title, and we did that event in I believe it was May of 2015. We went in the first three fights. RFA won two of them. Legacy won one, and then they had their title fights, and then the final fight was a guy by the name of Alexander Pantoja who fought for the RFA, and he fought a guy named Damasio Page who was Legacy's champion. It was an incredible fight. The first round, I believe Damasio won that round, and then the second round they got back on the ground, and they were grappling, they were there, and then right at like 15 seconds left into the round, Damasio was in Pantoja's guard, and Pantoja threw on a triangle, and then the 10 seconds clack 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 hit, and he kept doing it, and then the bell rang, and as soon as the bell rang, they separated him, and when they separated him, Damasio Page was passed out on top of him, and Pantoja won the fight. And Alexander Pantoja went on, and he was a UFC champion. He actually just lost his title because he dislocated his arm 26 seconds into the fight, so they called the fight. But he was on I believe he had 4 title defenses before he lost the fight. But I don't consider it a loss because he dislocated his arm because he fell wrong. So yes, on his record it's a loss, but he'll be back to get his title back here probably by the middle of the year.
That's awesome. That's
So-
awesome.
So what came of that? Yes, the RFA won 3 fights to 1, but what the most that was almost irrelevant at the time. I mean, yeah, it was nice, who doesn't like to win, but the greatest thing we got is that we got along great. Mick and our team and their team got along great, and once again creating leverage. So I was talking to Mick, and I said, hey, between the LFA and RFA, we are creating 80% of the content that Access TV has on their Friday night fights. And I said, the best way for us to create leverage, for us to get what we want, is for us to merge. Because if we merge, there's no one else out there that can do 30 shows a year. And that's the way that we could switch the table on them. And then basically in the middle of towards the end of 2016, we announced our merger. And right about 2 weeks before we announced the merger, the UFC asked Mick to become the matchmaker for the UFC. So Mick ended up taking the job at the UFC. We merged the companies, and we were partners the first year. So 2017, when the LFA was started January 13th, 2017, we were partners. And then in the beginning of 2018, we ended up buying Mick out. And then and the LFA is what it is today. So the LFA started in 2017, and we just did our 226th show a couple weeks ago. Actually, no, yeah, last Friday.
Wow. So you guys did a merger with another. So you guys almost, other than UFC and then LFA, who else is a competitor in the fight? Is King of the Cage not around anymore?
Well, I mean, we are the LFA is the number 1 developmental
Yeah.
organization in the world. That's not even me saying it. It's
That's
not
a fact.
it's a fact. I mean,
fact.
Google it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You could Google it. You could ask Chat GPT. You could ask Gemini. They'll tell you we're the number 1 developmental organization. So the UFC is what they are. And me coming from the management side, the reason why I've always wanted to create a developmental organization, which started in 2012 with the RFA, was that I realized that these athletes were fighting in a high school gymnasium in front of 500 people, and then they'd get the opportunity to fight in the UFC, and next thing you know, they're walking out at Staples Center with 17,000 people, and they were a little bit shell-shocked. So I wanted to create an environment so that these guys were a little bit got used to having cameras and lights in their face, so they weren't so overwhelmed when they stepped into the octagon for the first time. So that's why we created a developmental organization. And, at first, a lot of people looked at me like I was crazy, saying, I can remember people telling me, so you're telling me you're going to build up this talent and then just give them to the UFC? And I said, yeah. And they'd kind of roll their eyes and go, yeah, we'll see how that works. And, I kind of had a vision that I knew it was going to work, and it did. And, I'm so grateful for the team that we have around us, because obviously, yes, I'm the CEO, and a lot of times I get the the credit for creating this, but I wouldn't have been able to do it without the team of people that I have around me.
Why not like make it a competitor like Pride did? Well, like you're right there. You already have the best fighters in the world.
Just
Is it a matter
I'm
of like they need to make more money, or like what is
Well, it's
holding it?
just I'm just not interested in that. I like developing talent. I like
Yeah,
getting talent at a young age and developing them to make them flourish. And the UFC is it's kind of like the NFL. You know what I mean? Like to me, the UFC is like the NFL.
it is. There's
And
no There is no competitor
no,
now.
so like they say, oh, PFL. Well, the PFL is like the Canadian Football League, and what we are, we're like the NCAA Division 1 of our sport. So to me, um, I don't know too many athletes or too many football players that grow up wanting to play football and say, man, one day I want to be a big star in the Canadian Football League. No, they want to be a big star in the NFL, the same way that these fighters want to be a big star in the UFC. So the way I look at it is I knew we had a niche. I knew we had something that was good, that we developed the talent. And like I said, currently approximately about 40% of the current UFC roster are LFA alumni. Currently, 27%. If Pantoja would have not hurt his arm and lost that fight, we'd be at 36% of the current UFC champions would be LFA alumni. Because he lost that fight, we're at 27% of the current UFC champions are LFA alumni.
Those are just remarkable statistics. How in the world are you getting that sort of conversion out of your developmental organization? Because that's just unreal to have that many champions come
No.
out of LFA. It's almost like they should all start in LFA.
Well, I mean, like I said, we're the number one developmental organization. And the reason why I feel that our athletes do so well is that we really put on real fights. We put on good fights. So we prepare. Like the bigger organizations know that if you're winning fights in the LFA, you're actually winning tough fights and you're winning fights. So they know that when they get that opportunity to step onto the big stage, they're prepared to do that. And that's what we do. We put on tough fights. There's a lot of promotions out there that kind of create these situations for guys to build up wins. Oh, I'm 11-0, but they haven't fought anybody. Like if you're 11-0 in the LFA, like
You're a beast.
you're a beast. You know what I'm saying? Versus if you're 11-0 in some of these other
When
organizations, you
you're
could
the
have been
hanger at the fair,
you could have been you could have been fighting the hot dog salesman or an Uber driver or whatever it is, but not in the LFA. I mean, that's why our athletes are battle tested, and
so the vetting process is what you basically stand on. It's like your fighters. How do you do like find these specific fighters? What's like the protocol that you go through or the due diligence process to identify that a fighter is worthy to go through the LFA?
well, we try to give everybody opportunities. That we have guys who've had their debut with us and fought all the way through. Guys like Khalil Roundtree, he fought all his fights before he was in the UFC with the LFA. Mackenzie Dern fought a lot of her fights in the LFA before she went to the UFC. So I would say a lot of the managers and a lot of the athletes know that we are the breeding ground, and we're like the Division 1 of our sport. So it's almost kind of like if you're Alabama, right? If you're Alabama and you're a Division 1, football team, like how do they get their guys? Yeah, they recruit, but at the end of the day, the kids know, hey man, I want to go to Alabama because I'm going to get the experience, the coaching to prepare me to go to the NFL, or I'm going to go to another big university, or the SEC, or wherever you're going to
Yeah.
play. So that's the way I look
So
at it.
fighters know it's in the fight circle that the LFA,
Yes.
that's where you go first before you go to the UFC.
Well, it's not always like that, but like I said, look at the numbers. The numbers don't lie.
I mean,
That's
listen, you had Holly Holmes come through there, Alex Pantoja, like the best of the best.
Alexander Pantoja, Alex Pereira, Valentina Shevchenko, Henry Cejudo, Kamaru Usman. I mean, Carlos Prates, Brandon Marino, Brandon Royval. There's just the list go on and on.
Wow. Yeah, it's just remarkable. Now, what's a moment that you feel like really tested you personally and professionally when it came to building the LFA? Because it started off as a dream. It's not like it started off like what it is now.
No, I mean, there's been so many adversities that we've had to overcome from. I mean, it's constantly testing you. You know, as soon as you think you've figured it out, something new comes up that you've never thought about. So, it's a constant grind. But I believe in doing something you love. I love what I do. I love seeing the success of our athletes. I think our athletes, it's almost kind of like if you fight in the LFA, it's almost like a fraternity. It's like, once you've competed for the LFA, we support you all the way, regardless of where you go. Whether you go to the PFL, whether you go to one championship, whether you go to Ryzen, whether you go to the UFC, we support our athletes, and we just want them to do well, because their success indirectly is our success, and that means we've done our job right if they're having success.
Let me ask you this. How do you spot a champion like a Holly Holmes? What really separates these people early on?
I mean, there's different athletes kind of have different paths, but I think just them going out there and them competing, and them overcoming adversities. When a lot of these athletes, they'll have great starts to their career. They'll go out there and you know they're talented, and they go out there and they beat everybody. But where you really see the heart of the champion is when they overcome adversities, when they're going through a rough part, or when they're down 2 rounds and they come back and win in the third round, or win in the fourth round. It just kind of happens, and I think that, like I said before, it's just the LFA. The athletes that come out of the LFA that are winning fights in the LFA are battle tested, and I think the bigger organizations know that if you're winning fights in the LFA, you're actually really winning fights, and you're battle tested, so they know that when they go into the UFC or another big organization, they know they don't have to worry, is this guy going to perform?
What other big organization is there besides the UFC?
I mean, there's people, talk about PFL and talk about one championship in Asia, and they talk about Ryzen, but to me, I mean, the big
UFC is,
organization is the
yeah.
UFC. I mean, there is no real
Yeah,
other.
everyone else is just like, you didn't go to the UFC. Those are, I mean, so Pride's not around anymore. It's
No,
one now.
Pride got bought by the UFC.
Oh, so it's all okay. I didn't
Yeah.
know that Pride now is UFC.
Well, no, it's not that it is UFC. They own that intellectual property of Pride. They bought it, and there was a big things behind that, because there were so many athletes from Pride that were going to come to the UFC, and there was so much history in those athletes that when they bought it, really they bought it for the content. Because how are you going to promote Vanderlei Silva? How are you going to promote Antonio Rodrigo Noguera or Shogun Hua if you didn't have the content to show who they were? You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? So that was part of the evolution of the sport when they acquired
Pride.
Pride, and they started acquiring other organizations strictly for the content. They acquired a Strike Force. That's how they got Luke Rockhold. That's how they got Daniel Cormier, because Daniel Cormier was signed to Strike Force originally.
Yeah, so there's no more Strike Force or Pride.
No, Strike Force is owned by the UFC.
So in lieu of Strike Force, you're just seeing a smaller UFC fight. And now UFC has BJJ. UFC.
Yeah, they have BJJ. Yeah, for sure. I mean, if the UFC is not able to make BJJ big, I don't think anyone will be able to.
Yeah, I mean now there's just UFC BJJ. Now it's going to be, at the gym I train at, the youth start there at 9
Yeah,
full time, 6 hours BJJ training,
yeah,
and they don't go to school; they homeschool.
yeah,
And I'm like, so what are you going to do? We're going to train UFC. We're going to train jujitsu. That's what we're going to do for a living.
yeah.
Like,
Well, jujitsu has become a big business.
yeah,
Grappling tournaments. You can make a significant amount of money grappling now.
yeah. Between training, they train at like $200 an hour privates, and then actually now with UFC and IBJFF,
Yeah,
they're making decent money.
yeah. and a ton of other grappling tournaments that there are. There's Abu Dhabi. There's just so many out there, and hopefully it catches on. Like I said, if the UFC is not able to make it, um, I believe that if the UFC is not able to make it become a mainstream sport, I don't think anybody can.
Now, there's a lot of people that want to be MMA fighters. What's a common misconception about becoming an MMA fighter that most people get wrong?
Well, I just think a lot of the times people always see the end result. They don't see all the hard work and all the dedication and all the adversities and all the injuries and all the over things you have to overcome to be that. People see the Alex Pereiras, they see the John Jones of the world, but they don't really see everything behind the scenes of all the dedication and all the sacrifices you have to make to become successful in this sport. When you think about it, how many people want to be a UFC fighter? There's only about 600 to 650 athletes signed to the UFC. So to think that out of the whole world, 8 billion people in the world,
And everybody's fighting.
and everybody's so 8 billion people in the world, there's only 650 in the UFC. You have to really dedicate yourself and be elite to get there. And then once you're there, to be the elite amongst the elite, that's a whole other level.
Yeah, and then to be the champion, there's only 5 of them. Yeah.
There's only 11 of them.
Yeah.
There's only in the UFC. There's 11 weight divisions, and
Yeah.
then 12 if you consider the BMF
Yeah.
title.
And then to hold some of it, then you got guys that hold them in multiple weight divisions.
Yeah, nowadays they don't allow you to hold the titles in two different weight divisions, but they have been, like, for instance, like Alex Pereira. He's been the
McGregor.
middleweight champion. He's been the light heavyweight champion. And there's a chance he's going to be going up and become fighting for a heavyweight title. You've got McGregor, who actually he was the first one to simultaneously have them, because he was the featherweight champ and then he won the lightweight title at the same time. So he, like McGregor's, he's an incredible athlete, an incredible figure in our sport. I mean, the attention that Conor McGregor has brought into our sport. I mean, I feel that the biggest names of like people that have brought attention to our sport. One of them is Conor McGregor. The other is Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey was one that really revolutionized our sport. And before Ronda Rousey, Dana never saw women fighting in the UFC. And Ronda Rousey was someone that really broke a lot of barriers. She was in the first time the UFC was mentioned in Time magazine was because of Ronda Rousey.
Yeah.
So Ronda Rousey has been a huge staple in the success of the sport also.
Ronda Rousey. I feel like John Jones, Daniel Cormier. These are like
Yeah, yeah, but
but
yeah,
Ronda
John Jones.
Rousey and
To me,
John Jones brought some negative heat to the sport too, just
yeah,
because
but
his
I think
lifestyle choices.
he's a little bit misunderstood. John Jones is an incredible human being. He's a good person. Yeah, he might make some bad
We
choices,
all
but
do.
everyone has. And but to me, I think the people who, if you were going to say who revolutionized the sport, I would say obviously Hoist Gracie. And then you look at the fight between Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner.
Yeah.
That was the first Ultimate Fighter that basically put the UFC on the map. That was a revolutionary moment in our sport. And then you look at athletes like a Ronda Rousey, who
Tito
really,
Ortiz too.
yeah,
He's a
yeah,
big political
they're
figure here in Huntington.
they're all political figures, but I'm just saying, if you're going to really name who
Yeah.
the difference, I mean, there's been a lot of great. There's been Anderson Silva, there's been Lyoto Machida, there's
Yeah.
been Chuck Liddell, there's been Tito Ortiz, but I'm talking about like tipping points of where things made a difference. I would say Hoist Gracie. I would say the fight between uh, Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner, and then I'd go to like a Ronda Rousey, and then I would go to like a Conor McGregor that's brought it to new
New heights in
points, new
general.
heights.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's amazing to see the evolution of the sport, and now it's going to be. I mean, for my kids' generations, it is like the NFL. Every kid knows every fighter. It's
yeah.
very normalized in every. every culture now.
Yeah, I mean, Dana has said it very, in a lot of times, like fighting's in our DNA. Like
Yeah,
if you go and if you were on a four corners and there was a baseball game going on, a football game going on, and then there was a fight, everyone's going to watch the fight. I mean, think about it in school. When there was a fight, everybody would run to go watch the
yeah,
fight.
yeah.
People love to watch fights.
I take Dana's advice. I hear him on podcasts, and people ask him like, "What sport would you put your kids in?"
Jujitsu,
Jujitsu every time.
100%.
So not baseball. I mean, I put my kids jujitsu is like baseline. Then it's like baseball, football, basketball. You know,
I mean, I think kids playing multiple sports is always good.
yeah,
I think that I grew up playing a lot of baseball, and it's like, you know, but I played baseball during baseball season. I played football during football
yeah,
season. I played basketball. So I think it makes the kids very well rounded nowadays with all the specialties and all the things. Like you could play year round baseball. There wasn't year round baseball when I played baseball. I wish there was, but there isn't. But it really helps the kids diversify
yeah,
in playing different sports. So I think it's important, and living by the beach, so surfing is great,
yeah,
skiing if you live in the mountains. So there's just, as long as a kid stays active and I think is important.
yeah, yeah. Because it just helps with their overall discipline in general, and that's what
100%.
translates into real life, anyways.
100%.
So I'm gonna ask you this: what's like the biggest mistake you think you've made in building your organization now?
The biggest mistake, man, I don't, you know, that's a good question. I don't know what the biggest mistake would be, but
Would it be like not I should have signed that fighter, or I wish I got that
well,
venue, or
I
I wish
just,
I avoided that lawsuit
yeah, well, the reality of it is, I think everything happens
for a reason.
for a reason, and regardless of what it goes, like I tell our athletes sometimes, you see a kid come up and he's doing really well, and then he loses, and I always tell him, I said, you don't lose in the LFA. You either win or you learn. So when I look at mistakes, I don't necessarily look at it like a loss or a mistake. I look at it as like it was a learning experience. And sometimes when you lose something, I didn't go to college, so I think if I made a mistake, like we say, and oh man, I lost, I just look at it. Well, that was a semester of college for me. The money I lost, the experience I got, and I'll never make that mistake again. So, like I said, even when you make mistakes and you do that, I think what you have to do is you have to learn from them and improve. So I think that's the way we look at it.
Well, then piggybacking on that, we're not going to call 'em mistakes. You built this massive organization that has 27% of the current champions. What's some of the greatest lessons that you've learned?
Well, I mean, there's just so many different lessons and so many. I mean, I just think that you have to keep striving. Like there is no such thing as a perfect event. There is no such thing. Like I feel that when you when you think you've had a perfect event, you might as well just retire because there's always things that you can improve. I'm always looking to improve, no matter how great an event is, no how great. And I think that when you look at fighters as champions, like they may have an incredible fight, but there's always something that they could get better at. So I think that just stay focused on the goal and um, be humble and work hard. And I think those are the rules. Treat people the way you like to be treated, and I think that's the key to life. I mean, and I think overall, one of the biggest things that I think people need to recognize is having gratitude. Gratitude is something that I say this all the time. Gratitude doesn't cost you a penny to give people gratitude, but to receive gratitude, it's priceless. And time again, I think, why don't people have more gratitude? It doesn't cost anything to give, and for whoever's receiving it, it's priceless. And just imagine how much better this world would be if people had more gratitude.
One of some of the greatest fighters I met. And I was just telling you, I had got to hang out with another UFC fighter, Giga, and some they are just so meek, and so humble, so thankful. Some of these fighters are such just genuinely good people. You'd look at them, you're like, man, he's vicious. and you talk
Yeah.
to him, you're like, and he's so Christ-like, like
Yeah.
he is so godly, because
Yeah.
they just a lot of them are very humble guys. Is there a fighter in mind that you think of when you're like, man, that guy was just such a good guy
I mean, there's
or
there's
girl?
there's many there's many there's many fighters. I mean, one that comes to mind, is like Alex Pereira or Alexander Pantoja, and those are ones that I have personal relationships with, that I know the kind of people that they are. And Alex Pereira right now, to me, is the biggest star in mixed martial arts right now. There's no bigger name in the active name that's bigger than him right now. And he's taught me a lot, about, I've had experiences with other guys that I've worked with where I've seen the money and the fame kind of change them.
Yeah,
But what I've realized is that, money and fame doesn't change people. Um, it doesn't change people. When I used to say, oh, the money and fame changes people, it doesn't change people. What money and fame does is it magnifies the person that you really are. Because a guy like Alex Pereira, with all the money and the success that he's had, it almost seems like he's become a better person. But it's not that he's become a better person. It just magnified the great person that he was. And then when you see someone, you say, oh man, the money and fame changed him. The money and fame didn't change that person. What happened was, is before the guy had the money and fame, he was wearing a mask. He was being fake. He wasn't really being who he really is. And the minute that he gets the money and fame, he can act the way he really is. And that's what happens when people say, oh, the money and fame. No, the money and fame didn't change him. The money and fame just let him show who he really was. And that's what I feel. Money, success, money, all of that doesn't change people. What that does is it just brings out the person that they really are.
that struck me, and what you said really resonated with me, because I've had the opportunity to really be a blessing to many people, and take people from rags to riches. People that I thought were like, oh, I'm going to help this guy, and that's my job. I just serve, and you know, I'll take someone who's dirt poor and make him a millionaire, and I'm thinking, he's gonna be so thankful or whatever. Like, just magnifies who they were, and they're like, this guy's an evil dude, like, or girl or whatever. And it's
Yeah,
like, you're absolutely right. Money and fame just magnifies the character of the person.
100% it does. The 100% it does. You look at least that's my experience. And I could tell you, the person who really taught me that really taught me that to see that it was true was Alex Pereira. He was the one who showed
But
me
he
that.
showed it to you in a good light. You didn't.
He showed me in a good way that, like I said, it almost seems like the money and fame made him a better person. But it's not that it made him a better person. It just magnified the great person that he already was. And now he's got the money and the fame to show the real person he was. And I've also seen it work the opposite,
Yeah.
where I've seen people be very nice, humble, and then they got money and fame, and all of a sudden they're not like that anymore. But that's just because they were just being fake. It wasn't that the money changed them. Now they've just been able to take their mask off because they feel, hey, I've got the money, I've got the fame, I could act any way that I want.
Or I could be my real self.
I could be my real self. And that's unfortunately what you see.
Now you developed one of the best promotions ever in fight history. What's like a common misconception, or like basically what's like a sad truth about being a promoter that you've experienced?
Well, I mean, I think that, being a promoter sometimes, being good at your job kind of can bite you in the butt, like, so for instance, you have to promote, right? So it's like, let's just say the ticket sales are not that good, but you can't go out there and say, well, ticket sales aren't that good. You got to promote, you got to make it seem. So sometimes you have to hype it up, and there's just a lot of things that sometimes you doing your job can come back and bite you in the butt. You know what I mean? So like, even though maybe a show didn't do as well as people may have thought, but you, as a promoter, you got to promote. Nobody wants to hear, well, yeah, ticket sales aren't that great, and I don't know how it's going to go. like, what kind of promoter will you be then? You got to say,
Yeah.
no, no, things are great, things are going, and sometimes, I'm not going to say you're excuse my language, bullshitting, but you have to promote
Embellish.
it. You have to make it seem like it's good. You know what I mean? And that's what it is. And even if the numbers aren't what they are, like I said, I don't I look at that as a learning experience. I come back and I think, what can we do the next time to make it better, or what were the things? And there's some things that are uncontrollable. You got a main event that's a huge ticket seller, and he, pops his knee 6 days before the fight. There's nothing you can do to control that. There's nothing. It's just part of the things that happen in our business.
Now, kind of wrapping things up here, you've done a lot with the organization. What's a personal goal that you have for yourself, a goal that you have for your family, and a business goal that you have?
I think the goal that I have for myself is, I just I want to be a good father. And I have two daughters, and I just want to know that I'm, a good father, a good person to my family. That's what's important to me at
Yeah.
the end of the day. And my oldest daughter is, I she got married about a year and a half ago, and I'm gonna have a grandson, so I'm
Wow.
super excited about that. and
Congratulations.
and thank you. Yeah, I'm just, just to be a good person. My goal is to leave this place a little bit better than when I got here, or do whatever I can and make a difference, to make a difference in the world and make a difference in people and their lives. That's what really excites me. As far as, goals for business, goals for business is to just keep growing, and keep helping people get to where they want to go. That's really what enjoy. That's really what I, enjoy, is seeing people's success. And I look if I was to look at a fighter, or look at a person as a block wall, as a fighter, if I look at them as a wall of success, if the LFA can be a few of those bricks that make that wall of success, I'm totally happy with that.
God bless. God, that's amazing. And I hope you hit every single one of your goals. I have one last question for you.
Hmm.
When you're in front of the pearly gates,
Hmm.
what do you think God's going to tell you?
I don't know, man. I really don't know. I hope he welcomes me in with open arms. You know what I mean? I don't know. I feel I'm a good human being. I've always treated people the way I live by simple rules. You treat people the way you'd like to be treated, and you do the right thing. I've made my mistakes. I haven't always been perfect, but I don't think anybody has. But overall, that's what I want to do. I just want to make a difference, and try to help as many people as I can in this life.
Well, you're a great servant. You've done a lot. You've already built an incredible legacy. Your company's named Legacy,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
but the fact that you've changed an entire sport forever. You've bred champions. You instill goodness in people, and you just are an incredible human being, a godly human being. Raise great kids, going to be a grandparent, and the fruits of your labor are showing in
Thank
many
you.
many ways. Not just with your work, with your family, with your business, with who you are as a person. God bless you. I hope you hit every single one of your goals. If people want to connect with you, how can they find you?
Well, I guess, probably the easiest would be through social media. My Instagram is, Ed Suarez Pro, and that's probably the easiest way, to get a hold of me. It would probably be through social media.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for jumping on the show. Appreciate you.
My
Legacy
pleasure.
Fighting Alliance, guys, make sure you check out their fights. They're breeding the best of the best champions on the planet. Get to see them before they become the UFC world champions.